G'day and welcome again to another Campfire Project. And today I've got two special guests with me. I've got, first of all, Adrian Hanks. How are you, Adrian?
Hey, really good, Alan. Thanks. I just returned from Europe, so I've got a bit of the airplane head on me with a bit of a voice, a bit of a deep husky voice today. But apart from that, feeling really fantastic from being away and being back, and great to be back on the show again.
Fantastic, because you've been here a couple of times and we really enjoyed the talks we've had with you. And we also have Rama Raphael. How are you, Rama?
I'm also really well, Alan, but I'm also a little bit foggy in the sinuses as well. But apart from that, really well, thank you.
Fantastic. Now, both of you are working with the Blue Wren Foundation, which is a project I'd like to hear more about. But first of all, I know that you're both working together. I'd like the people who are listening to this to understand who both of you are and how you got into doing men's work, etc. So, Adrian, would you like to start us off with your story?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. Look, I've been involved with men's work now for over 25 years. My first ever sort of men's camp, if you like, was down in Tasmania 25 years ago. And there were 35 men sitting in a massive big teepee for about 4 days out in the bush. And it was just a great intro to that depth of the men's work. There were some really great things going on for those few days. And I came out of that and just with that realization that this was part of what I want to do. I want to get more involved with men's work, and I have been ever since. Straight after that 4 days, we started our own men's group in Tasmania. We were called the All Saints, not because we were saints, but because we met in the All Saints Church Hall. And, and there were 7 men in that group, and we actually met every Tuesday night for 2.5 years until I moved to the mainland from Tasmania. So that was a really powerful experience for me. And from that experience, I then started running men's groups on the mainland, Victoria, Queensland, wherever I've lived. And that's continued over the last 20 plus years. And of course, on the back of that, about 3.5, 4 years ago, I set up the Blue Wren Foundation to work more specifically with men with relationship education, to support and help men in that process of what we call not stepping over the line in the sand in their relationship, contained and safe in relationship. And Rama's come on board with me on that. So, yeah, it's quite an amazing journey, Alan, with working with men. I've sat in circle with hundreds of men in Australia, overseas, in Africa. And I think it's one of the most powerful places to sit is around the campfire, up there behind you with a group of men. I think it's an incredible place and an honouring place to sit. And, yeah, I can't see myself ever stopping doing that. It's just such a powerful place to be.
Fantastic. So, thank you. And Rama, tell a bit more about yourself.
Oh, well, Alan, my healing journey really began in Vietnam in 1969. I was conscripted in a helicopter. I had an experience, an epiphany, if you like, and that propelled me onto my path in healing. And so I came back trained as an osteopath through the 70s, and then began to move into the personal growth work, using tools like rebirthing, breath therapy, bioenergetics, expressive work, deep emotional work. And what's really interesting is that I'm looking at Adrian's background, which of course has Wollumba, now Sacred Mountain, in it. And in 1987, and I'd been running groups, mixed groups for human beings, men and women. And I'd met a woman who lived in Bellingen, about 4 hours away. And I knew that that's where I was moving to. I could feel a lot of changes happening in my life on many levels. And so I did a solo vision quest. I climbed the mountain before dawn to be there for sunrise. But even before I reached the top, I heard really clearly that I was to focus on men's work. And I got to the mountain and I said, well, okay, and what do I do with the men? And I recognized very clearly that the tools that I had at that time, the breath, bioenergetic, emotionally expressive work, unlocking, unfreezing, armoring in the body, were actually perfect tools for men. And so I did my first retreat in Bellingen, 3 days, 3 nights with 12 men, and I was number 13. And that was the beginning. And then about a year after that, one of the women in that community came up to me and posed me this question, which was, I would like you to initiate my 13-year-old son. So I took that on board, and that began an extension of the work with men, of working with young men, with teenage boys, and looking at what constitutes initiation in this culture at this time. And what could we draw from the ancient cultures, particularly Aboriginal, but not only that, in order to take the young men through a passage into manhood. While, of course, us older men have been grappling for decades now around the authenticity of manhood, what it truly means, how to be a balanced man, strong yet sensitive, and compassionate, wise, all of those qualities that, elders through the ages have held, and how can we embody those and transmit those to our young men. So that's evolved into worked within the government sector for quite a few years, running programs in schools, relationship education in high schools. Adrian came into that as well, which was sort of the beginning of our journey together. And of course, presented at numerous men's festivals and gatherings. For me, the edge of my work, I guess, would be the emotional and spiritual. To reclaim the full power of our emotions, to release that which no longer serves us, and to, deconstruct, to unravel the conditioning. That's a continuing project. And over the last 5-6 years, my wife and I travel the world running our sacred union work. Sometimes I work just with the men, she works just with the women. Sometimes we bring them together, and that's been a great joy. And also, the universality around the world of the sort of issues that men and women are dealing with. The cultural conditioning, try to unravel it, try to find what's authentic in our hearts and minds of how we can reach each other. And on a deeper level, for me, it's right from the beginning, my commission is the restoration of the brotherhood. That's the deeper commission. And on that level, on that note, in about a year's time, I'll be starting a global online school of the sacred masculine. So I'm beginning the preparation on that already. So that sort of brings me up to present time, Alan.
Excellent. So as you said, the spiritual masculine, we keep hearing about the term masculine, but we don't really hear many people bringing the two together. And so what were the main things that took you down that path? As you said, you had these other modalities, and as people say to me, you've done all this different stuff, and I go, yeah, all of those things became part of everything that I do now. So all of those things were stepping stones to where I am today. So can you tell us a bit more about that, the spiritual side of the masculine?
Yeah, I'd love to share just a little story that I was giving a talk at a little festival, had an mixed audience, men and women. And I said to them, what happens when I put these two words together? Sacred, feminine. And the women nodded and said, yes, of course. I said, okay, what happens when I put together these two words, sacred, masculine? And they had a bit of a chuckle, and somebody made a joke. Well, it's a bit like saying military intelligence or fresh intelligence. They don't really go together. I said, okay. So then we had a deep discussion about what's happened through the ages. So for me personally, it's basically driven by a deep spiritual questing. It began for as long as I can remember, back in my teens or before that. So a deep questing for the spiritual truths that underlie, all the religions, all the practices. What is the common thread of the deep spiritual truth that holds us together on this fragile planet? So that's always an ongoing exploration and an extraordinary journey. And part of my lineage, if you like, is to connect with those men. In our own mythology, we have, the Knights of the Round Table or the Knights Templar, and those men who step forward, often at great personal sacrifice, to bring the very best of the masculine through and to try to embody that.
Excellent. And you were going to say something there, Adrian?
Yeah, the words that come to me, Alan, very much, and for Rama, is the masculine moral compass. Like, as men, where are we walking forward as males, as the masculine, carrying that masculine? And a lot of it for me is about that moral compass, about what we're doing and what we're not doing on the planet, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, environmentally, sexually, intimately. And when we come into that place from that sacred masculine space, and trying to hold ourselves, from the sacred, how challenging that is in this day and age to be able to walk in that space as men. But the necessity of that, I really think, if we're going to go forward as a race, as humanity, but particularly from the masculine perspective, how can we hold ourselves in that sacredness and walk our path in a sacred way? And I think it's essential in this day and age, and I think it's essential for men like ourselves who have been around for a while, the elders, if you like, to then bring that through to the younger men. And a bit like Rama, a little bit of a story. I did some youth work in Armidale, in a youth refuge. So the young guys had come out of juvenile detention, picked them up, and we'd have them for a week to sort of integrate them back into society. And the first thing I'd do when I picked them up from the airport or from the juvie centre, wherever they came from, was I'd go bush with them for 4 or 5 hours. Just sit in the bush in the silence. Most of them were scared, shitless, because they'd never been sitting in the bush before by themselves. And I remember this one young man. He was a man from out west in New South Wales, and he's sitting in the pickup van. I think there was like 4 or 5 other guys in there. And as we're driving along, he's sipping a can of Coke, and he threw the Coke can out the window. So I pulled up in the van, and I stopped, and I said, "Okay, jump out and pick the can up." I said, "You're in my patch. No, you don't do that." And we sat in that van for 45 minutes with a standoff. He wasn't going to get out. And I said, "I'm not going anywhere. The doors are locked. I can sit here all night. I'm on 8-hour shift." And eventually he got out and he came back in. I worked with that young man for a week. And the day he left, he walked up to me and said, "You're the first man I've ever respected because you held me in my space." That to me is sacred masculinity. Where we teach the youngsters that moral aspect, And I remember that young guy, just beautiful young man, but he was wild, but all he needed was to meet another man who could hold him in that sacred space. And I managed to do that with him. So one of the many, many young men that I hope that took that lesson into his life, and is now 10, 15 years later, bringing that into his adult life with his own children. So it's powerful stories there to be had.
Definitely are, because it's all about the connection that we make with people. If you look at our own kids as they grow up, they get into the teenage years, you ask them what school was like today. All right, what did you do today? Nothing much, or whatever. You just get grunts, if that sort of thing. They've disconnected from us. So to actually have somebody who you don't even know at all, who's probably just, by his attitudes and his actions, very much disconnected from authority, to then have somebody challenge him on that. I can imagine that standoff. I reckon it would have been quite incredible. It would have been cut the air with a knife. It would be so quiet and silent. But to get that connection and how things then change. When you mentioned, sacred masculinity, as you said, the sacred women side of things, or femininity, and the connection that was immediately understood there, but then the disconnection between the sacred and the masculinity, when you're asking men, the disconnection there. A lot of it's around the words that we're using. As soon as you talked about, Adrian, about moral compass, I connected that really quickly.
Yeah.
But in the back of the mind, there's that little bit, sacred, this is a little bit over this way, a bit too far. How do you find some of the terminology you use and how that connects? How do you use that to connect with people? Do you use it to get them thinking, or do you use it as because that's what you believe and then you steer them around to understanding?
Yeah, a couple of things. I'll let Rama jump in on this in a moment too. But one thing I'll share is in the, if you like, the New Age women's space, we call our women goddess. Like my woman, I say she's my goddess. Now let's bring that over to the male language. are we gods? And to be able to use that, we haven't got a word for men the same way women have that word of the goddess, the New Age goddess. We're all down to worship the goddess in our sexuality, intimacy, and a relationship. But we don't really, and I've been working with this for many years, trying to find that phrase or that word that we can use. And the closest I come is that sacred masculine or the sacred man. But it still doesn't quite measure up to that goddess word. And it's a real challenge. Yeah, it's a real challenge to be able to connect to that deeper aspect of ourselves where we don't have a label for it. So the closest I think we can come is that sacred masculine. But even then, it's a trigger for men because it's a bit woo-woo or it's a bit new agey. So when I'm working with a guy, straight out of a steel yard or the mines, who's totally not into woo-woo or doesn't want to admit he's woo-woo because he's working with the mines with the blokes, it's finding that language to work with them. So sometimes, yes, I use that word, but oftentimes it's very blokey language, and we have to work across the board with men if we want to get the men on board. It's a fine line of the language we use, and Rama's probably got something to share on that too.
Yeah, now the equivalent can be the word warrior. Now, when we bring warrior in, it brings it that strong spirit, and it's a good word, but we still don't have the word and the language for the goddess equivalent. That is, we don't believe. Deep down, men do not believe deep down that they are worthy of the equivalent of the goddess. And so underneath that is that real lack of self-honoring and self-esteem. It may be covered up, it may look good on the surface, but underneath it there is often a deep lack of self-love, and that's often the primary part of the work. And the other problem with warrior, as great a word as it is that it implies action. I'm a warrior of light, here to serve humanity. And that's great. And action is needed. But the real balance is the power of stillness coupled with the power of action. When to know, the wisdom, when to know, when to draw back, when to center, when to ground, and then when to take action. That's the true warrior's way. But it's still a reasonably good catchword because it embodies the nobility or the highest aspirations of men.
I think the first three letters of it, war, W-A-R.
Yeah, that's right.
That's, as you said, it's the action, it's the fighting, it's being the protector and all the rest of it. And the emphasis is on the action. Whereas with the goddess, there's no emphasis on action there at all. And so finding that, and most of the men that have tried to aspire to that through history have been more megalomaniacs.
Yeah, that's right.
So we don't want to become that sort of person ourselves.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of role models, and yet in a very real sense, with the state humanity and planet is in, with the distorted masculine, what it's doing in its actions in a very negative and a very self-destructive or very unaware state needs to be taken action against. And that's sometimes we need to galvanize around that warrior word, but it's a warrior working in collaboration, in partnership, in kinship, in brotherhood. And it's coming out of the lone warrior. I've got to do it all myself. And coming into the support of our brothers, because each of us has a gift, each of us has skills, each of us has insights that we can bring to the table. And when we gather around that table with respect for each other, that's when we can achieve real change, and which we need more than ever. But the distorted masculine and its very, very destructive capabilities is part of what's calling this crisis forward. We can call it the environmental crisis or the climate crisis, but it's deeper than, it's even deeper than that, because it's also the social crisis, oppression in so many lands, oppression of women, and therefore oppression of men, and therefore oppression of children.
Whenever you have oppression of any particular person or group, that extends to everybody else, because we are a part of each other's environments. We impact on each other. So when you do men's work, you're actually doing family work, you're doing children's work and everything else. Because, you know, the men that become better men, who's the greatest recipients? Their partners, their children, their communities. So when you're working with one man, you're really working with all humanity. If you think of it that way, that could extend out.
Absolutely, yes.
So being able to do more of that type of work is really important. So with, you know, one of the things that I've said to any of the men who have come on and we've chatted here is I want to know about what they're doing at the moment and how they can help other men right now with any projects or other things that they're doing. And I'd like to, I know you've got one coming up on the 22nd, and I'd like you to tell us a bit more about that so the men, especially in your area, can know what's going on and they come along and experience it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look over my shoulder, and we've got Wollomban here, which is the Aboriginal name for Mount Warning. You know, the English called it Mount Warning. It's the first place in Australia that sees light when you're on the top of that mountain. And we're running a retreat, a vision quest, if you like, for men on June 22nd, 3 a.m. start in the car park, because we're going to start the whole day with the sunrise from the top of the mountain in a very sacred way. And coming back to that word sacred, you know, we're choosing the space because this mountain is a sacred masculine energy center that's been used for, you know, tens of thousands of years. And Rama and I are very much in respect of when we climb that mountain. We seek permission. We do a little bit of a ceremony before we go on. We don't just go traipsing in there and, you know, making noise and just disturbing the sacredness of the place. But tuning into the mountain, tuning into the energy of what it can actually give the men. And Rama's been doing this, and I'll let him share a little bit of a moment on this for many, many, many years. And I went up there probably 2 years ago was the last time I did the trek with Rama there, and he led a group of men. And the profound insights I got from just tuning into the power of that mountain and letting go of old self, old Adrian, and tuning into new self, and gathering, if you like, the wisdom of the mountain, the wisdom of all that has gone before that mountain. So it's a really powerful place to start the trek. And men that join us get Rama and I together, 50 plus years of experience in men's work. Both worked in psychotherapy, both strong men that can hold circle. And any man is free to come and join us for that day, for that time, to really sink in, to get rid of the old story, to let go of the old story, let go of the old self, and let go of anything that no longer serves, and to bring in the new. It's like some things in our lives have the use by date. Unfortunately, we keep carrying them. It's like having a fridge, and we keep going to the fridge and seeing the use by date cheese in the back, but not having the courage or the wisdom to throw it away. So it's like, how do we unpack all that unused by date stuff? And we all have it, myself included. And Rama and I will guide the men on that journey to unpack that so they have space to bring in the new. So really powerful. But I'll let Rama explain more about the day of the sequence of the day and what comes forth for the men. So any men out there, if you want to come and join us, it's going to be an incredible journey starting on this amazing sacred mountain, which is above Byron Bay, between Byron and the Gold Coast. So easily accessible. And it'll be just an amazing journey. But I'll let Rama share more of the details on the sacred journey we're going to be taking men on. So,
yeah,
Rama, my brother.
Well, this began several years ago when two men from Holland came out and wanted to do something sacred. Again, that word, something special. And because I've loved and lived in this region for a long time, I devised a program that would incorporate so many of the elements in one day. So we begin with the mountain climb and we descend together. And then we have a large brunch at a beautiful cafe by the creek in the valley. And then we cruise on down, we drive down to Lennox Head. Now, Lennox is a very powerful place in its own right again. And we have the ocean for more cleansing. Next to the ocean, we have a lake very unique, Tea Tree Lake, for more cleansing there. And we tap into thousands and thousands of years where this was a birthing and nurturing place. And then not far from there still exists a Bora ring, which is an Aboriginal initiation ring. And it's currently maintained by national parks. And it's the original inner ring for the initiation of young men. And so we'll do some work in there. And over the years, I've taken many groups of men and boys into there, and often on the full moon. It's a very powerful and beautiful place. And then we cruise up to Lennox Headland itself to extend even more of the vision quest as we look out over the ocean. That's a very powerful portal up there as well. Now, by this time, it's getting on for around sunset. And we complete the day with a superb meal at the Italian restaurant in Lennox Head. So it's basically a 3 a.m. till 9 p.m. day, incorporating all of those elements so that whatever the men bring, whatever they bring is welcome. It's all welcome, all the anger, all the fear, all the grief, all the longing, all the dreaming. There isn't much that Adrian and I haven't heard in our many years as therapists. And we very much come from a place of no judgment. And I'll speak for myself on this. My own life experiences have taught me so much about empathy and lack of judgment. So whatever anybody brings to that day and to any of our work is always welcome. And that one, you know, we can go there again, we can forgive again, we can begin again. I fully believe, you know, this, my career in healing tells me there is nothing that cannot be healed. There is nothing that is unhealable. No matter how far we've gone down the drain hole, no matter how much of the dark path we've walked, perhaps, who we are is much greater than that. And with some help, support, and some skills and the power of the land, we can retrieve our light and retrieve our power.
Excellent. Yeah, because as you're saying that bringing anything that you've got along with you, it's like you've said, Adrian, that cheese in the back of the fridge, you're finally taking it out of the fridge and going to do something about it.
Yeah.
Being able to bring all that stuff forward is the only way to clear it.
Yeah, and it's essential to sometimes have a look in the back of the fridge and say, oh, what's sitting in there? What do I need to clear out? Because when we clear that space and bring in the newness, so we get that new paradigm happening, that's, of course, when we get change in our personal relationship, change in our partner relationships, change in family and community relationships. But it starts with self. And, you know, this truly is a vision quest for men to come in and do that vision. You know, who am I right now? Where am I right now? And who do I want to become? Where is that future potential me? Where's that future potential self? And that's the vision for me. You know, I can sit on that mountain and visualize how we want it to be. And then doing the work, doing the psychotherapeutic work, doing the action work, and then also bringing the stillness in, we can bring in those changes. But for me, it has to start with a vision. I say we do the vision, we do the planning, and then we do the action. And just to come back to something that Rama shared a little earlier, was the sense of action and the sense of stillness. And in many, many workshops that Rama and I've run together, one of the things we do with the men is get them to be still, physically still. And the difficulty in men just standing still for more than 10 seconds, the fidgeting, the moving, and the challenge of just being still in their being is incredible to observe. It's you know, for men listening in now, I'd say to you, stand up for a moment and just see how long you can actually be still for. Can you be still for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes in that stillness of body, but then beyond that, the stillness of the mind, trying to stop that chatter in the mind, because that's the challenge. You know, can we be still enough to allow that sacred masculine in to bring the self in? Because it's in the stillness that we actually do the receiving. So it's learning to be still. I think that's a powerful word that we'll be using and working with on this Vision Quest.
I think most of the time we're always using noise to keep ourselves occupied so we don't have to deal with stuff, so to be in the stillness. But as you mentioned, you mentioned the word therapy, but it's not therapy as we understand it, where you would sit even in a group and you talk about your stuff. It's actually the experience of being out there and the togetherness and knowing that other men have got their stuff, that you're actually working on your own in that situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's, so, you know, and I know that some of the people are probably hearing different words here and there and going and putting their translation on the word, like when people talk about therapy, oh no, I don't need therapy.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's therapy that you do for yourself. That's okay. I'm in control.
Yeah, yeah.
But putting them in a situation where they can do that, which is most important. It's, as you said, it's a sacred place. It's a safe place for those men then to give themselves permission to take that cheese out of the back of the cupboard, to make, or out of the fridge, to make those changes in their lives.
Yeah, yeah. And just getting back to that word therapy, you know, the original word therapy in the English language comes from a community that were around in the time, you know, 2,000 years ago in the Middle East, and they were called the therapeutics, and they actually lived in a community. They were the healers. So the therapeutics, so people would go to them for the healing. So therapy for me is a process of healing, and that's where the original word comes from. So for any translation of therapy, just translate it into self-healing. It's the easiest way to translate therapy. So.
I love that, and I love the word self in front of it. It just changes the context altogether. Rama.
I mean, another catchword is self-inquiry. You know, that each of us has a very unique path, and so much of our life is on the outer focus, you know, money, success, status, providing for the family, putting food on the table. But there is the richness of the inner life that, if left unexamined, leaves us much less richer. And so our call is to go into that place of stillness, which is the place of power in our being, go into the heart, and from that place, examine our own unique journey, because it's not like anybody else's, and that's the beauty of it. And then change that may come from that then ultimately must benefit not only myself, but my brothers, my sisters, my children, my community, my planet.
Yeah, it brings everyone together.
When men step onto that recognition that I have such deep and unique value, whether I'm working or not working, whether I have money or not, whether I have property or not, that my being is of such deep value, and my wisdom, my intelligence, my heart, my strength are the things that are of real value, and I'm going to do my best to enhance those and to connect with other men who are also on the journey together to support each other.
That's it. So my understanding of original initiation, it wasn't Dad's job to make a man of his son. It was his job to get him ready for that. And it was a bringing together of other men, where the boy would then learn from those men, but also look at each one and go, I like that bit of that person, I like that bit of that one. And so they've created their own unique personality, their own unique character, which from that moment forward, they were of value to everybody else around them. But if they were a clone of Dad, they'd have to wait for Dad to fall off the perch. So it was a case of helping that boy into manhood, but to find his place in the community to where he's an instant value. And because he's unique and everybody else is unique, everyone has an equal value. And so there was no ego. It wasn't a matter of being the man. It was a matter of becoming a man. And if you're a man with all the other men who are a man, then you've got a strong tribe, a strong village, a strong connection.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah. And now, of course, we're all globally connected. I mean, I've just come off this morning with my wife transmitting a live webinar around the planet. And on the other end of it is this beautiful man who was my age. He is now a retired architect from Buenos Aires. He's a passionate Argentinian. And he was in tears for a large part of that particular transmission, because even though he's a certain age, in his emotional body, there were things that he'd never dealt with or released. Yeah. So it's not a matter of chronological age. It's a matter of time, opportunity, and readiness. And he's a beautiful and inspiring man. He's done much with his life, and he actually has a large global project that he's about to present to the United Nations. He's still passionately involved with life. And at the same time, he's also dealing with unresolved issues from his past. Yeah, at the age of 71, which is my age. Yeah.
This is what I love about it. Since I've started the Campfire Project, the men that I've interviewed around the world, and then finding that there's more and more that are on a similar quest to make changes in our communities and everything else. It's absolutely brilliant. We've been able to bring so many different men's groups together, and we're just finding as we do that, there's just more and more.
Yes.
So when women say that they can't find a good man, I go, well, you're probably looking in the wrong places, because there are a lot of us out there.
Yeah, that old myth really needs to be dispelled. You know, I hear that a lot. You know, where are the good men? Well, I see them every single day. I meet with them. I talk with them. I spend time with them. There are beautiful men everywhere. There are good men everywhere. We're all good men. It's just that we carry the wound, we carry the story, we carry that old story. And I think a lot of what Rama and I do in our work, we help men to see that wound. You know, we go deep down the rabbit hole to that deep core wounding. And sometimes it's personal wounding, sometimes it's global wounding. You know, the war is a wound that we all carry as men. You know, we carry that DNA within us from our fathers and our grandfathers and beyond. And how do we clear that? How do we help men to see the wound and heal the wound? Because if we work out of wound, if we speak from wound, it's not a nice place, because we're in protection mode. We're trying to protect that wound. And we do that through fight or flight, usually through fight. And I think this is where the sacred masculine steps in, where we actually look at the wound, we heal the wound, and then we have the new paradigm, then we have the new masculine. And we're not working in that old wounded paradigm, because it's a dangerous place to work from. And sadly, we've been working into that for a long time globally. And for me, I think it's the change is to fix the wound, to heal the wound on a global level. It's really important to do that, particularly in this day and age.
Yeah, because when I look at, I'm doing a bit of work with children at the moment, especially with putting courses together for their parents to understand them. One of the things that keeps coming out is that children act out when they don't have the language to explain what's going on. And children are really acting out. They don't naturally do that. They learn from their parents on how they act out. So if you look at your kids, you get an understanding of, well, this is what I'm doing now. And this all stems back from being a child as well. So how much stuff have I got there that I'm allowing to hold me back? But I need to be able to step into that. So I need a safe place to be able to do that. And then finding men's groups who, you know, especially for us men, who do that is so important, where we know that others have been through similar stuff. And I love the fact that you said, Adrian, that stuff that you're still carrying as well, because we all do. This is a journey. You know, once we get to the end, well, that's pretty much the end of the world, our life, isn't it? So we will always have stuff to work on, because the more you're doing stuff, the more things are going to come up, the more new stuff is going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's not a destination, but a journey, as they say.
Yeah, man, I've got a backpack full of stuff. That's why I don't take on anybody else's stuff, because I've got enough of my own. Don't worry about that. So
yeah, I would have been a lot taller if it hadn't been for the weights I've been carrying around.
Yeah, for me, it's a daily journey. You know, the reflections are there with my wife, my partner, with the children, with my brothers. There's reflections that continue to feed back to us. You know, where am I being authentic? Where am I being compassionate? Where am I tolerant? Every single day in our interactions, we can refine and refine and refine. And that's an ongoing journey. And something I'd also like to come back to, Alan, and that's around where we bring not only our personal history from our family, but what we've absorbed from the culture, what we've osmosed. It's like the goldfish. You know, we are, let's say, Western men. But whatever it's been, what have I absorbed from my religion, from my culture? What's my culture telling me now? Yeah, and we've seen massive and rapid change in that. And am I still carrying any of that deep conditioning? Because it's just conditioning. And my behaviors, are they coming from, and my acting out, is that simply coming from my conditioning? And what is the work that I need to do to unravel that conditioning? Because deep in my heart, I know what's authentic. Deep in my heart, I know what's real. But if I have an overlay of that conditioning from the culture, the religion, from the parents, I mean, I remember it shocked me once doing a rebirthing session and going back to being in the womb, of how much I was osmosing of my mother's beliefs in a pre-verbal state in the womb. And then the gender conditioning begins. You are a boy, therefore. You are a girl, therefore.
Right.
And so all that conditioning, imprinting comes in. And so our path to freedom, to liberation, for being truly authentic, comes with the unraveling of that conditioning. Yeah. And looking at the matrix, looking at how we're being programmed, how the media, et cetera, is programming us, and going beyond the programming and supporting each other to break out of the matrix. Because planetary liberation, if you want the big project, look, I ran my first men's retreat in 87. After the 3 days, I was meditating and integrating, and I sort of heard this voice within that said, okay, now your job is to dismantle the military-industrial complex.
Just a small job.
If we want a job, if we want to get onto the path of liberation, creativity, and not destruction, then it's a very big wake-up call that we need to align to. And perhaps, to step out of our small world, as important as that is, and maybe step out of our comfort zone and reach into a project that has value. I've been totally inspired by teenagers around the planet who have their own company that is, doing something positive for the environment. In India, in Nepal, this inspiring young man in Colorado who has walked into the United Nations. He's taken his local council in Colorado to court and won as a teenager. I'm inspired by the young people, and at any age we can join hand in hand as men and with the women for our own liberation, because the time is nigh.
Yeah. On the back of that, I've just come back from Minsk in Belarus. I've just been over there for a 3-day leadership training, and the youth in there, they were probably about 10 or so young men and women, in their early 20s, and just the focus they have at that age, 20, 22, 23 years old, absolutely incredible to sit in circle in that leadership circle, 300 people, and just hear the voice of those young people, confident, clear. They have that vision, they have their quest and they have their vision, and they know where they're going, and they're just over 20 years old. It's just incredible to see that strength and that vision coming through with the young people, as Rama says. And I think that's the thing we have to embrace, that there are young people coming through, but they also need that eldership. They need that guidance to hold them through these rocky times. And I think that's where, in terms of the journey Rama and I are offering the men, any young men that want to come on board, they're absolutely welcome to. You get those young men in their early 20s or so, just to be held in that space, just to give them permission to be in a space with other men. I think that's really important.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things we do with you've mentioned the kids or the young people that you were with the other day, and then we look at other kids or people of the same age, and we have two different views of them. But I guarantee that with the ones that you were with, they had a connection. Whereas the other kids that we look at and go, Gen Ys or millennials or whatever, we sort of put them down. Well, they're usually disconnected. They haven't had that guidance. At the same time, we can learn from them as well, because every generation is a product of the previous generation. You know, builders, my parents were all about, and their generation was all about survival. You know, how to get our food for today. So what they teach us to do, get security, superannuation schemes, work with the same government department all your life and that sort of stuff. Yeah. And then we've got our Gen X going, well, you got your food for today, you got your food for tomorrow, but we want to be recognised for who we are. So give us our titles and everything else, and careers became important. And of course, their kids, well, I think in England they called them latch kids. They would let themselves in. They just have to latch and go in while their parents are still at work. Yeah. So each generation creates the next generation that comes along. And instead of looking and separating from them, we need to bring them together. We've got to build that village. Yeah. We need the older men to be able to guide the younger ones through, but at the same time, listen to them and learn from them. Listen to where they're coming from and guide them through that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a deep hunger in the young people for the elders. And we have to look around and go, well, where are they? Because the ones who hold a lot of the power in a negative sense are actually not elders, because they don't hold the preservation and nourishment of the earth as a primary focus. They have the opposite. And so the young people wonder, where are the elders? So for some of us, it's time, and it has been for a while for me, to step forward and say, well, we're still here. Having said that, there's now 5 men, friends and acquaintances since Christmas have passed over. So, so those of us who are still here, it's very important to hold those codes of eldership within our being and transmit it. Remember once this beautiful Aboriginal, a really well-known Australian musician, and he talked so lovingly about his father. He didn't have the stuff. It was at a panel where the other men of other generations were discussing what a hard time they'd had with their fathers, and I can totally resonate with that. But this Aboriginal man was in such praise and affection of his father, because within that culture, the father was able to transmit the codes of eldership, the teachings, the spiritual teachings, the practical teaching, how to fish, etc. And so, you know, we need more of the gathering of the elders who will continue to support each other, while we elders acknowledge that, yes, there is always work to do. There is always inner work. But we can provide the inspiration and the leadership. I had a beautiful, he looked like the Avatar. He was, I think, 6'7" in the old terms. And he was 20 years old, clearly a leader. Very soon he will step into leadership. Very inspiring, just turned 20. And he still needs guidance on an emotional and on a spiritual level, because there are places that hasn't gone to yet, this lifetime at least. And so he needs mentoring in the very best and highest sense of the word.
Yeah, and if we do that, the end result is we're showing the boundaries, we're showing them the way to do things, we're extending their envelope, so to speak, and they can get to that envelope extension in safety and then go further again. If we don't have it down, if they haven't got it back here, they're stepping out all that way into the total unknown, and they've got no idea of where they're going. And that's why we see so many young men today. And that's another thing too, the term man or men. I look at, we don't have good men and we don't have bad men. We just have men and we have boys. And boys can be 70, 80, 90 years old. If they haven't stepped into their manhood, they're still boys. It's getting back to the rites of passage of going through and your initiation, stepping into manhood and being prepared for that and having the right men around, the support and everything else. But a lot of males don't have that support around them. And I think a lot of them go to their grave in their elder ages still as boys.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one of the reasons why this work's so important.
Yeah, and I see that and experience that a lot. You know, the workshops that Rama and I have run over the years, you know, we get everything from, you know, the 20-year-old boy right up to the, you know, 80-year-old man. And you're right, Alan, in that, the maturity or the connection to that masculine or the sacred masculine. Some young men have it early and some men wait all their life and sadly don't actually get a sense of what that sacred masculine is. And I think that's a very sad thing in our day and age, where men are not engaging and not understanding what it is to carry that flame of the sacred masculine within, because it's such a powerful place. You know, I'm still an initiate. You know, I'm still learning, but at least I have the support of good men, you know, like Rama and other elders around me to guide me on that path. And I think the importance is to find the men that have the wisdom, have the knowledge, have the experience, and also to be able to say, hey, you know, just settle down for a while. You know, having the strength to hold the strong young men. You know, I've got 4 young male men myself, you know, as a father, and they're strong young men. So I have to be that much stronger, not in terms of that physical, you know, hold down, but just the mental capacity to hold them and say no.
And that's what kids are. Yeah, kids are looking for.
Strength.
Because we look at young children, we say, I always ask parents, how far did they push you? They didn't push you over the edge, they took you right to the edge.
Yeah.
They're not trying to break you, they're testing you to see if you can hold. Because they're already telling us at that age, they need that eldership around them, they need that guidance from their parents and everything else. They need that community.
Yeah.
So, as I say, my greatest teachers have been very youngest of children.
Yeah.
And so learn from them as well. As you're learning things, it's not a matter of going, oh, I've got to know it all before I can teach it. If people who come to me and they want to learn about profiling and I teach them, they say, well, when can I start teaching that? I said, as soon as you've used it and you understand it, then go and teach what you've learned. Yeah. Because that will also cement it so you understand it strongly yourself. But anything I've taught you, you have a moral obligation to also pass on to others. This is the way the flow goes. This is the connection.
Yes.
Yeah. And how can young men, you know, learn to teach other men, or how can men teach other men if they're not doing the work themselves? And this is, I think, the opportunity that Rama and I offer the men is, and I could come and do the work for yourself, but also pay it forward. You know, if you can come and do some work and get yourself set, and you can clear your old baggage and your old story and bring in your new, then pay it forward to the next generation, to the next man or your neighbor or your brother, or your uncle or cousin, whatever it is. But I think you know, back to self, come and do the work for oneself, learn some skills, and then impart those skills onto other men. And then collectively, globally, we can actually all move forward together in this new sacred masculinity energy that it's so important to have and embrace in this day and age. It's so missing. You know, we see it. It's so missing. It has to be restored. The restoration of the sacred masculine is the mission. It really is.
So, just in finishing off, tell us a little bit more about where exactly you're running the one on the 22nd. How people get there. I'm going to put your links up on this as well, but let people know where they can find some more information.
Yeah, so great. So look, you can go directly to my website, www.adrianhanks.com. You can certainly give me a call and have a conversation with me from there. Then my phone number and everything's on that website. That's probably the easiest way. And
both our phone numbers are there. Both our websites are there. If you'd like to talk any further or read more about who Adrian and I are, then that's available.
Yeah. And just those times again, it's Saturday morning, 3 a.m. in the car park. So it's either a case of carpooling, and we can certainly do that. We'll be leaving from, you know, Gold Coast and Byron Bay, respectively, to we can take men can turn up there. So 3 a.m. the trek begins for that 18-hour day right up until 9 p.m. at night. So it's going to be an incredible journey. So the men need to be there for that beginning trek in the dark with, you know, a couple of headlamps on the head, usually, or torches, because it is a bit dark in there at that time. Because remember, it's midwinter here in Australia on the 22nd, so we're riding that solstice energy as well. So a very, very powerful time, and it really is about the quest. So that all men are welcome, yourself included, Alan. If you want to make the trek up from Newcastle up to Byron and come and step into that space, you'd be very welcome as well.
Excellent. You know, as some of you may know, I've been through my own rites of passage and journey as well, going on for about 17 years myself. For anybody who's been listening to this, to sit in that peacefulness, in that quiet with other men, even though you're sitting quietly and everything else, but you'll never feel so connected to other people in your life as much as that. Because, and you just look at somebody after those events, you don't need to talk about it, you just look at somebody, all of a sudden you'll be laughing about the things that you laughed about there, and also it just brings it back to you straight away. And the more you can anchor that, the more it empowers you in the process. So to get out there at 3 o'clock in the morning for my old bones, and that might be a bit on the cold side, but it's something that I really recommend to anybody to go along and check out and experience it for themselves. It'll change their direction.
Absolutely.
So, gentlemen, thank you very much for being on today and coming and having a chat with me. It's good to see that you both got back okay from where you've been and everything else, and I'm glad that lightning behind you hasn't struck you there, Adrian. But just that picture of the mountain, the energy up there would be incredible. So it'd be really great to be in that. But thanks again for being here. Adrian, as you know, that we also have the panel discussions where we get other men from around the globe getting together on Zoom here, and we talk about issues that are affecting us, people in general around the world, our families and our children. So Rama, I'd love to give the invitation to you as well. I advertise those regularly, and it's always a first in, first best dressed situation. So there's quite a few men and women now that we've interviewed as well. So we're getting some really great mixed panels as well happening. So love to have both of you back on those as well.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah, it'd be lovely.
Excellent. And to everybody else who's been listening today, thanks very much for being here. And we'll see you on the next Campfire Project. Bye for now.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.